Hello, people. So this was one of the problems on the packet from today, and I wanted to just go through it with you to make sure that you really feel comfortable. So this is just me going over a problem that we didn't get a chance to do, start to finish, so you can kind of have at least one example with a screencast. So before I do anything else, I'm going to factor the numerator and denominator to see if there is a whole. So remember, wholes come from factors that appear in the numerator and denominator. So before I start finding any information, I want to figure out if there's a whole, and if there is, remove it. So if I factor the numerator, I get x minus 3, x plus 1, x plus 1, x minus 1 squared. So immediately I notice there are two factors that cancel. The value that creates a problem for me is -1, because if I put -1 here and here, I get 0 over 0. So that's where I'm getting this -1 from. It is the value that creates a problem in the top and in the bottom. And once I've identified that value from the factors that I've canceled, I'm going to cancel them out and then use this as my function to answer all the rest of the questions. So before I do anything else, I'm going to plot that whole. Oops, just kidding. I can't plot the whole because I haven't figured out what the exact address is of it. But remember, that -1 comes from the factors that canceled here of the value that produces a 0. So how we find the second part of the equation, second coordinate, is once you have one number, you just substitute it in. So I'm going to take the function, which is, I'm going to highlight it just so that I'm always referring to the same thing, this thing in the box, and I'm going to substitute -1 in, that's this value here, into the function. So if I do that, I get -4 on top. -1 minus 1 is -2, but if I square -2, -2 times -2 is a regular 4, and so I get -1. It's purely coincidental that this number and this number matches up. Obviously, these numbers don't always have to be the same. So then I'm going to graph -1, -1, which is probably somewhere around there. So that's how you find a whole. And now I'm going to go through and find all the answers in the same structure that I always do. After I find the wholes, I move on to the vertical asymptote. So the vertical asymptote is what makes the denominator 0. So I very much have a problem with x being 1. Maybe I'll not highlight that anymore. So if x is 1, that's problematic. So x equals 1 then graphically forms an asymptote, a vertical asymptote. Okay, more. End behavior. End behavior comes from comparing the degrees. The degree of this numerator is 1. The degree of this is 2. Since the degree is bigger on bottom, the trend is always towards 0 if the denominator is bigger. So again, really annoying because it looks like I'm drawing another asymptote in, and I'm not. I'm drawing a trend line. Remember, this is a suggestion. This is a fact. This is a trend. This is a mathematical impossibility. Those are two very different things. Suggestion is guidance. It's not like what needs to happen. So I can cross here. I can do whatever I need to do. This is not something bad. This is a suggestion. This is something bad. Okay, then I move on to the other stuff. The x-intercept is what I would get from the numerator turning into 0. So the value that would produce a 0 on top is 3. So 3, 0 is here. And again, notice that this is on the end behavior line because, again, this is the number 3. End behavior is the edges. That's when x is -1 billion or 1 billion. So x being 3 is nowhere near that. So it's totally fine that this is on this line. The y-intercept, oh, I'm going to get a message from Johansson. Sorry. So now I'm working with an adult because I am an adult. Okay, so I'm going to now replace y with 0. That's not right. In order to get the y-intercept, I'm going to replace x with 0. So if I do that, I get 0 minus 3, 0 minus 1 squared. So I get -3 over 1, which is -3. So 0, -3 is somewhere down here. Okay, so that's about all the information I have. And to be honest, that's all the info that I need. So if we look at what I've graphed so far, These dots are trending downward. Perfect. And on the other way, it'll be trending towards that blue trend line. So there we go. I'm really done with the problem. Once I've got the dots and the general trend, I can just connect the dots and see what happens. Okay, so now I've got another dot here. Perfect. I can figure out if it's going to bounce or cross. And then I'm going to use the multiplicity of the asymptote. So what I mean by that is this asymptote was created by this factor down here. So if it's facing down on this side, it literally only has two options. It will face up or it will face down. How do you know? You look at the multiplicity of the bottom. Why the bottom? Because we're looking about the behavior about the asymptote, and the asymptote came from the bottom. So if it faces down on this side and the multiplicity is even, evens mean we face the same way. So on this way, if it's facing down, on this side, it must be facing down as well. If this happened to be an x minus 1, let's say, cubed, a cube is an odd number. Odds face opposites. So if it were facing down on this side, it would be facing up on this side. So again, I have a multiplicity that's even. Evens, we face the same. So since it's facing down, I'll be facing down the other direction as well, because they're facing the same way. And then all I have to do is get to this dot there. That's an x-intercept. That came from this multiplicity. The multiplicity of that is odd, which means it crosses through. So I have to come up from there and then plateau towards the trend line. If this was x minus 3 squared, it would bounce and hit this blue line, but hit it from underneath it versus above it. So that's what the pretty little picture should look like. Notice you got a lot of common sense. If you know how to fill out this information, the rest of that is just connecting the dots and seeing if they're trending upward or downward. You don't actually have to substitute any numbers in. You can just use multiplicities and the trends that are already there using the dots that you have to fill in the rest of the gaps. Hopefully that helps. If not, come to my office hours and subscribe to my channel.